Welcome back to Hardball. There's been no shortage of critics when it comes to the way President Obama has handled this oil disaster, but the circumstances that led to it didn't just happen on his watch. A climate of deregulation and cozy relationships between oil companies and government officials can be traced right back to the Bush-Cheney administration and before. BP participated in Cheney's secret energy task force, and its chief executive had a separate private session with the vice president. Lax regulation led to a culture of corruption at the Minerals Management Service. Halliburton reportedly gave Cheney a $34 million golden parachute, or I might call it a signing bonus, with the Bush administration when he left the company to become Bush's running mate. And former Cheney staffers went to work for Big Oil, like Andrew Lundquist, who lobbied for BP after his stint as executive director of Cheney's energy task force. Talk about a close revolving door here. And then Womack, it may not have anything to do with it, but it looks like the same problem. Is not she was a spokesman for Cheney's campaigns. Now she's heading up BP's media operation, the same flacking operation for both Cheney and the oil company, which he once worked for, and which gave him all that money when he went to the White House. In any other country in the world, we'd be thinking this has a very bad smell. So can culpability for this disaster be laid at the doorstep of the previous administration? Mark Halpern is with Time, and Richard Wolff is an MSNBC political analyst. I want to talk to you, Mark, and then Rich. Jump in here, both of you. It seems to me that if you put all this together, it looks like a third world country. This is the kind of stuff that happens in, dare I say it, some Arab countries, some African countries, where it's all backsheesh, it's all who you know, it's all inside stuff. If you're not in with the current government, which is the ongoing current government in these countries, they don't have elections, you don't do business. And if you are in, you got it made.
Well, it's just like what happened with Wall Street in two respects. In one, the technology changed, the private sector business practices changed in a way the regulators didn't keep up. That's a fault of people in Congress and in the White House.
As David Gregg would say, unpack that, will you, a little bit? Well, what do you mean by that?
They're drilling deeper and deeper without updating the way the regulations would work. Okay. It's obviously, none of us are experts on this, but it's just logical.
Well, let's not give them any more slack through technological change here than I want to give them. When you allow the company you're supposedly regulating to pencil in the inspection report that you then cover over in ink, that's corruption.
Sure it is. But
right. And that's what's going on here. In other words, it's not the form, it's the fact they let the oil company fill it out.
Right, but there's something else, which was the ideological mission of the Bush administration. I interviewed Bush in 1999-2000. He made it very clear as a candidate that one thing he wanted to do was relax regulatory oversight.
On his oil patch buddies.
Not just oil, everything, financial services, you name it, because they felt that through the Clinton years, the balance had tipped too far. They weren't going back to the Reagan era quite as much, but the laissez-faire approach was what they wanted to do, and that argument is playing out right now between the Tea Party and the Republicans on one side, the Obama folks on the other. The balance between business and government is being played out. Is
there any government, now that we've all seen this for 6 weeks now, is there any evidence there was any real regulation, federal regulation of oil safety?
It was totally, there was some, but it was totally insufficient. But I'm telling you.
Was there some? What was it? Because they're filling out their own inspection forms.
I don't think
how many people actually had the job of making sure? First, let me give you an example. When they applied for that permit to drill that well down, which is a mile below the surface of the water and 2 miles deep, they said they had the capacity to deal with a spill, something like 10 times that size, a multiple of that size. They didn't. They lied, and nobody checked.
Nobody checked, and the regulations weren't sufficient. There were too many people too close to industry involved in the process, and the regulations, this regime was not keeping up with what the oil companies were doing. In this case, I think, because I think there will be prosecutions, there's going to be some corrective there, but I think also there's going to be a corrective in Congress.
Chris, there's something else. Look, it ties back to what Alan Greenspan said about banks. There was a belief that self-interest, these companies could look after their self-interest to the point where they would not allow this to happen. It was not in their interest.
That's what Axelrod was saying the other night. Nobody has a bigger interest in fixing this leak than the BP. They still believe that.
That's the problem. The problem is the idea that industry itself is going to look after their interests and therefore not take these kinds of risks because they're not trying to save money. Well, they want to cut corners. That's why you need effective oversight and effective regulation. And if you don't have people who are going to come in from the outside and check this stuff out, you don't have regulation.
Do you think, I mean, this is always thinking outside the box. None of us are technical experts by the least measure, but, you know, I wonder whether BP doesn't have a somewhat different interest. They have an interest in letting this leak go on for months. If at the end of it they can cap it or get another route down to that oil source and make all that money. But do they have the same interest we have in just damn well stopping? In other words, would they explore all possibilities like blowing the thing or something like that we might think, wait a minute, we don't care if they never get another drop of oil out of this thing. Stop the leak. Whereas they say, no, we want to make sure we get this well in 3 or 4 months when this leak's over. Well,
this is devastating for their share price. There are real reports out there that there could be some kind of breakup of the company or seizure of pieces of it. This is not in their interest.
Well, what about Tony Hayward, the CEO, saying he wants to get back to his life again?
They are one serious whistleblower away from going out of business, as far as I'm concerned, because any corporation of this size is going to deal with this in a way that is not in the public
Have you noticed
interest.
that Dick Cheney has said nothing? The expert in this field, the man who comes from Hardball. Well, that's safe. But the guy who worked for the company as CEO, the guy who knows a lot about this stuff in terms of its government relations, its inspections regime, the whole regulatory aspect that that company's under. He knows it all. He knows what he's done about it, too, which was hold the secret meetings with the energy bosses, hold the private meetings, separate meeting with BP, right? He knows all this.
Yeah,
he's not exactly available for interviews, is he?
Yeah, it is interesting that the political calculation has been, he's quiet on a whole bunch of stuff, on the foreign policy thing as well, in a way that he wasn't before. But to say this is all Cheney's fault...
I'm not saying, I'm asking you, no, I'm asking is the philosophy of deregulation, which you guys have pointed out,
yeah, absolutely.
Is that responsible for a failure to regulate? Isn't that definitional?
There's a lot of focus on how this puts the president on the defensive. The mindset of Dick Cheney about how to regulate big industries, including in energy, is also going to be on the defensive eventually, because they're going to have to explain not just what they did, but what should be done now to keep stuff from this happening.
Does oil have a special protection against regulation over the years? I think it has, because my evidence by digging up was in terms of oil pipeline safety on the mainland of the United States. They had one inspected, and what I was able to figure out, if they're transferring authority over through 4 agencies, there's left with one guy. They don't have inspections by federal officials.
What's interesting is that the politics of this has not played out as you'd think. When you have Bobby Jindal saying, I don't trust BP to clean this stuff up, but we want BP to carry on drilling. I mean, where does this leave, for instance, the Anwar debate? The whole point was that the technology was so good, the footprint was so small that there would be no spills, there would be no problems. That debate has not played out yet, and it's playing out right now in the region in unpredictable ways.
Remember the old Rahm Emanuel line, which I'm sure he wished he hadn't said, was to let no crisis go unexploited. Have they failed an opportunity here to go to the public with a bullhorn and say, not go get the terrorists, but here's a time we need a new energy policy in this country?
It's about to happen in the Senate, and the pressure is going to be on moderate Republicans, not just the 2 from Maine and Scott Brown, but a few other moderate Republicans
to join in
bill. If they can craft it as a way that
How do you know those 3 are on? They're on financial regulation, but are they on for energy?
They may be. They're the easiest gets, but they're going to need more than just the 3 of them. And I don't think those 3 go alone. They're going to need a couple others, but they've got their eyes on some others, and they can use the crisis. Everyone mocks what Rahm Emanuel said, but in this case, it's true. I think the energy bill is more likely now rather than less.
Are the only Republicans in America watching right now who want to see a new energy policy those from the cold, the frost belt, because they hate the oil industry?
Lemieux from Florida was in with the president talking about this. Murkowski in Alaska, there are pieces that he's been trying to give away on the energy piece of it, like offshore drilling and nuclear, to get these people on board on climate change. Does that trade-off still exist? I don't know.
Is the Nobel Prize-winning Mr. Chu able to do this? Do they have the political finesse to put together a majority policy in this country that we can actually make a change? I keep waiting for them to do something.
I'd bet more on it than immigration right now, but that's
that's hopeless.
Those are the 2 big
because they don't want to deal with immigration.
They can do it before the election, but they can also do it in the lame duck section after the election, and I predict they'll get one of the 2 done.
Energy, probably.
No, I'm saying they'll get energy done either before the midterms or more likely.
Really? Are you hopeful like that? We'll get a real energy bill in terms of dealing with what we have to do in terms of fossil fuel, moving towards renewables down the road. The potential of solar, if you put the stuff in place, is awesome.
You need a bunch of Democrats who've already lost their seats, who are not afraid to then vote for regulation in a way that could hurt the economy. Because remember, that's still a bigger issue for most Americans. People in the press are more concerned with the Gulf right now. Jobs and the economy are still a bigger issue for Democrats and for the country.
You're going to have to get Republicans to sign up to some kind of carbon tax, at least specifically for the power energy industry. Could you sell that right now? I don't know.
Let's talk about politics, pure political discussion. Can the president, if he has the right spokespeople and the surrogates around the country, shift a measure of responsibility for this disaster between now and November to the Republicans that left office before he came in?
Only one.
Specifically Cheney.
After the leak is plugged, yes. Before, no.
He's got to show action. He's got to get people down there.
Can he shift some of the blame for this help to the Republican deregulators?
Some of it, but this is a collection. This is a collection of incompetence and recklessness. He's got to, first of all, shift it to BP. That's the primary responsibility.
Okay, thank you, guys. Thank you very much, Mark Halpern and Richard Wolff. You wrote Maverick, and you wrote
Renegade.
Game Changer. Renegade, same place. That's your John McCain book.